We're going to talk about everything you need to know going into Thursday night's game against the Arizona Cardinals. Can the tackling get bigger? What are the biggest issues with this team? Can Paulson Adebo turn it around and live up to his preseason and camp hype? We're going to cover all of that stuff and much more, and obviously get into if this game is a must win for the Saints. I think the answer to that before we even start the show is an easy yes, but what are the actual implications of it? We're going to go over all that stuff from the Better Call Bado podcast studio. And if you need help with car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime and Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call Bado at 504-323-477 or 985-677-1085 for your free consultation and case review, badolaw.com. And check out our friends at Firehouse Subs, Veterans Boulevard location. Great people doing great things for the community. Buy a sub from them, and there's a good chance your money goes back into the community one way or another. Here we go, another episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast.
What up, DJ? We in the dome right now. We in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing, and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
We in the dome right now. We in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing, and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
As you can tell, last year it was an off year. But we reloaded, and now it is our boss year. Adebo back there, and yeah, we got the badger. Don't forget my son, and don't forget the pass rush. Jameis QB1 dropping down to MT. Ball handed off the Alvin with the quick feet. So when you see the Saints marching, yeah, we gon' trouble you. At the Super Bowl party, eating on them doubles. We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing, and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing, and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
NewOrleans.Football podcast. We are back, and we got another show for you guys heading into the Thursday night game against Arizona, coming to you from the Better Call Bado podcast studio here with Mike Triplett. Let's just start with the big picture question, just right off the bat. Let's get into it. I think I asked you this last week to start too. What is the temperature right now? Where are you pegging the feel, the standing?
Yeah.
Where is the team right now in this moment?
It's bad, and I mean, this is what we talked about right after the game. A week ago, I didn't call this a must-win game because they weren't supposed to win it. They had all those receivers out. They had Marshawn out. The Bengals are a pretty good team. But the way they lost, I think, enters a little bit of crisis mode. You can't be giving away games that you had wrapped up. They every game they can win this year, at this point, they have to win. So when you have one, when you're up by 9 with less than 20 minutes to go, when you've been outplaying the other team the entire game, and you give it up in such kind of epic fashion by like a massive failure on defense, a massive failure on special teams, and the offense just disappearing after it started so good, it's really concerning.
Yeah, they took away the injury excuse too. They took that completely off the table for me because they kept the game in reach. They were winning with 3 minutes left. They should have won that game. Injuries obviously are an issue, and I'll never be one of those guys where it's like, well, you got to win with what you got. No, sometimes injuries become a factor in a game, in a situation. And if you have those guys and you don't have them, it matters. Because if you're going to say not having Mike Thomas or Marshawn Lattimore doesn't matter at all, then you're saying they aren't good players. They are good players. They impact games, but they overcame it. So then if you lose it in those last 3 minutes, it's hard for me to sit there and say, well, they didn't have this, they didn't have that. Obviously, the game could have been different with them, but they made it not matter. So that was a game they needed to win, and I thought they ultimately ended up blowing the game. And I think it's a tough place to be in right now. I think this was probably the loss that I think resonated the most because it felt like they came out and played so hard. The defense was flying early on. that Demario Davis hit on Joe Burrow, I think, was reflective of just the passion and the energy they were bringing to the game, and then self-destruction
Yeah.
in the final 3 minutes, and I think this is gonna be a tough one to rally back from. I think maybe it's good they got a short week, they gotta get back out there, they gotta play a
Yeah, they
game.
beat Arizona kinda we're done talking about the crisis, and we're talking about, "Oh, geez, they're only a half game out in the NFC South."
Then
But
they lose another one and they're back in
yeah, but
crisis.
that's the problem is the so, I will say this, I mean, technically, I guess, yes, those injuries do matter because if Thomas, Olave, and Landry are on the field, maybe they even approach the, second half more aggressively, and certainly those last 2 drives more aggressively. Maybe it's easier to convert on 3rd and 4 if you have those receivers to throw to. But the bigger concern with this team is I shifted from, can they survive this rough stretch of the season and hit the reset button and be like, all right, they're 3-3 now. Now they can go play and be the team we thought they were going to be. Two, I don't think they are the team I thought they were. Like I don't know if this is a above 500 team because we've seen them lose in so many different ways that as I said after the game, they now
Well,
to
let's
get to
rephrase
not
that.
yeah to
Should
get.
they be above 500 team?
I,
Should they be?
I
Maybe
think
they
that
aren't, but should they
I
be?
think when healthy, they have enough talent to be, but like I'm just too disturbed by this team now, and we're going to get into this soon. My biggest problem with this team is I think the secondary might stink, or at least it's not special like it used to be. It's a concern. So even when they're healthy, I don't know how good this team is.
I think they should be above 500. I think that
They should be, yeah,
I think they've blown enough opportunities where you look at it and you say easily they should be at least 500, and I think that they should be above it. They should have beat Carolina, they should have beat Minnesota, and they should have beat Cincinnati. Granted, they won a game in week 1 that they shouldn't have won, so they stole one back in a sense, but I think that they've severely underachieved to this point, and I think that the talent's there for them to be better than their record is right now. They just
that's
haven't lived
without
up to it.
question.
So yeah, I mean, they might not be a 500 team, but they should be, and that's the issue overall right now. And yeah, you mentioned that the end of game scenario being without the guys not being aggressive. I wrote the story. I mean, I think that's a chicken and the egg type of
Yep.
situation. But I do think when you play conservatively like that repeatedly, sometimes it's not going to work, and sometimes it is going to work, and it is the right decision. When it doesn't work, I think you open yourself up to, all right, should this have changed? Should this have changed? Could they have done this differently? Should they have ran on second down with 9 men in the box? And is that what you're doing? Should Taysom Hill have been out there in some capacity? Where's Rashid Shaheed? Like, is that a spot on second down where maybe you try to get down the field a little bit? It felt like they were trying to make sure that their defense didn't end up back on the field. And your defense is supposed to be the strength of the team. So I mean, there's just a lot wrong. Everything's out of balance, and they gotta they gotta settle that somehow, and I'm starting to wonder if they can. Like, I have the same concerns. Can the secondary be good enough? Early in the season, I thought, yes. I think it's kinda crazy how far it's kind of unraveled and how
Yeah,
quickly it's kinda happened. There's a lot that has to get right, and it doesn't all have to get right Thursday night, but enough of it does. Because if they lose that game, New York Times has the thing with the playoff odds. They're at 17% right now. If they win that game, they got a 33% chance, or I'm sorry, 20 some percent, and then if they beat the Raiders, it goes up to 33. If they lose, they're down to like 9 or 10%.
yeah.
So, I mean, it's bad mathematically if they lose this game.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, that all makes sense because of their record. Although, shoot, 6-11 might make the playoffs in the NFC this year, the way things are
It's
trending.
crazy.
But like I said, my concerns aren't more what's happening to their playoff chances. It's like, we've spent so many years being like, oh, can they get out of this? Can they survive this rut? And then when they become the Saints, can they make up for it? I just don't know what the Saints are right now. The weird thing is, over the last couple of weeks, I've developed more confidence in their offense. Like I look forward to after this mini bye, seeing what this offense looks like now that they've kind of found their run game and the offensive line's playing a little bit better, even though there's an injury concern with Andrews Pete. And whether it's Jameis Winston healthy or Andy Dalton, either one is going to be better than the quarterback play they had in the first 3 weeks. And if they have those receivers back, most of them healthy, I'm kind of interested. I think this offense could still be good at some point this season, but I am concerned that this defense might not like this. We've said it a bunch of times. Deuce McAllister said it in London. I remember this team is built where the defense and special teams have to be elite, and I'm worried that the defense might just be slightly above average.
Is your optimism, man, I'm going to it early. Is your optimism on the offense and how you feel about it quarterback dependent?
No, I I think I would not change my record prediction if you told me Jameis was gonna start every game for the rest of the year, or Dalton was gonna start every game for the rest of the year. I think they're about even. I like what we've seen from Dalton better. I like the way the offense is played with Dalton better, but part of that is they found their run game. But I also think that a healthy Jameis is in the same tier as Dalton.
Yeah, I
Different styles, of course, but I'm giving them the same scouting grade or in the same tier.
I tweeted and deleted some stuff yesterday just about like people arguing about the quarterbacks, and because I think there's so much ahead of that issue on this team. This team isn't built to be a win because team on the quarterback. Granted, there's going to be situations like last week where your quarterback has to lead you to something, and Dalton didn't. I thought that was a big hit on him. If he had won that game, I would have been sitting here 100. Dalton has to start.
Yeah.
He has to start, and that wouldn't have been locked in forever. But going into this game, if they're like Jameis is starting, I'd be like, that's fine. Like I'm indifferent to that position at this
Yeah,
point, just
I'm
because
pretty similar,
yeah,
yeah.
Dalton hasn't shut the door. But yeah, it's so much ahead of that. Like the defense has to play well. Blake Gillikin has to punt well. They finally stop fumbling the ball, which we'll see if that's temporary or permanent. That's a huge thing. Offensive penalties seem to get better in this game. That's a huge thing. But everything has to be right, and then the quarterback is just supposed to kind of usher it on. Now, I think Jameis has more win because upside ability. Saw it against Atlanta. You know, when they got into some long situations in this game specifically, you look at the coverage. Everybody plays too deep now. Jameis is a guy that can hit that pocket and cover too, and that's a weapon. It's a huge thing for him. But I do think that Dalton does a better job underneath, getting
Yeah.
everything moving, all the rhythm stuff, all that. We've talked about this a million times. We don't got to
I
relitigate it,
kinda like
but
Jameis better with the second tier receivers that they had if you need the quarterback to make something happen, and maybe I like Dalton a little better when it's get it to Mike, get it to Landry, get it to Olave, get it to Kamara, but again, yeah, I'm with you on the fact that I like I like either one of their chances to produce the best quarterback play of the season after the mini bye when the offense is almost fully healthy, if that's ever gonna be the case.
all right, let's go back and forth on these.
Yeah,
Let's our biggest issues with the team. Let's try to get
yeah,
to three. We'll go more if we have some variances
yeah.
on our thoughts. What's your biggest concern right now with the Saints going forward?
Mine is the secondary right now. Now, the caveat is I don't think they have a top 20 quarterback in the NFL. I mean, maybe they have the 17th best quarterback in the NFL, and that's a concern. I mean, that erases a lot of things. But with our expectations for this team going into the season, with what we've seen, with what I think they can become, that's one unit that I don't know if is gonna get much better. Obviously, it's way better when Marshawn Lattimore is out there. Um, that goes without question. But Paulson Adebo hasn't been what we thought he'd be. Bradley Roby's been slightly disappointing. They cannot find an answer in the nickel, and the safeties have been disappointing. Marcus May's been pretty good, but Tyrann Mathieu is not playing to his usual standard. One interception all season, and not really a lot of hope that that's suddenly going to turn around. And obviously that's what leaves them open to the most second guessing because of all the personnel decisions they made this offseason to let Marcus Williams go and to basically cut CJ Gardner Johnson heading into the season and thinking that their depth was going to be okay there.
I I I agree with you on the secondary. The one thing that I've been kind of wondering is we all got it wrong with Paulson Adebo this training camp. Now he might turn it around, lock in, everything changes. But to this point, that I think was the biggest miss in analysis. And I put myself at the forefront of that because I was buying in. And I've been thinking for probably the last 15 days nonstop, like where did we get this wrong? Why did I get it wrong? What were the tells? And I think I stumbled upon one yesterday, and I think this is a bigger issue with the whole team, but I think specifically to him. In training camp, who did we not see practice really at all? Like the legitimate locked in starters. Like they had a very easy camp. It was a lot of work done by the backups. Paulson Adebo practiced every single day, every single rep. And maybe that was the biggest tell of all of where they thought he actually stood and how much work he needed to get because the guys they had starting were very seldom. And I think that led to some of the slow start as well. That these guys, I don't think they practice hard enough this summer, the
Well,
starters
yeah,
at
that's
all. And the other thing then, so when the top receivers aren't practicing, like Adebo's dominating against other guys, and one of the issues we've seen with him is when they're like playing off coverage at the top of routes, when guys are cutting, like he's not able to get around quick enough. And yeah, maybe you're keeping up with Kirk Merritt and guys like that, but then
He
when it's
was winning
Jamar
some of those
Chase,
one-on-one
he was.
matchups against Mike
He
and
was.
Jarvis and
But these aren't
Olave,
burners.
but yeah,
Yeah.
obviously.
Well, Olave's a
Yeah.
burner,
We
but yeah,
weren't we would I don't think we would have gotten as excited if it was just against Kirk Merritt
so,
every time, but it's still a
so,
good point that he wasn't truly actually
some of
tested
the
during the
big
preseason.
picture stuff,
Yeah.
there would have been like if there was a consistent, okay, the ones are playing every day against Adebo, I think it would have been a more. I'm not saying he just beat Merritt, like yeah, he got wins against other guys, but I think it would have been more sobering
Yeah.
if we had a different evaluation, and
Well,
it
you
was a
could throw in
significant blind
you
spot.
could throw in the trip to Green Bay too. He wasn't facing
Yeah.
receivers who were succeeding in the NFL when he was in Green Bay either.
And look, I think he's going to be better than
Yeah.
he's been. I think the safety play fails him a little
And he
bit.
should be the number 2.
He's not a
Yeah.
guy that's, it's just even on the speed, strength, all that stuff, measurements, the RAS score. Like he's not someone that's probably, a lockdown full field guy against burners. Like he does need some safety help and they got to support him a little bit better. But some of the stuff on the cuts, like he's been a little bit slow to get around. I'm like, man, why didn't we see that as much? And then I think that's part of it. I mean, I think we saw some of it and it's forgiving when you're seeing it, once in a while, and then it's like he's locking in and just bullying everybody. And then well, who's he bullying? And I think that was something that we definitely missed. So in my analysis of myself, like that's the autopsy on why I think I kind of didn't see that the right way. My number 2 issue tackling. I mean, it's just at
Whew.
the forefront. I think that's the number 1 issue on the team actually. And they're losing games because of it every single week. It's leading to explosive plays. The explosive plays have become uh just repetitive over and over. And one of the things I I hate to dissect comments, but DA, we asked him about it last week, and he's like, "Well, our numbers have been good if you look at the last few years." I'm looking at the numbers this year. The numbers this year are not good, and it's become something that's a recurring trend. They got to fix that. They got to tackle, and they got to stop giving up 40-yard plays.
Well, there was a weird thing going into that whole start of that Cincinnati game, even before they started completely missing tackles. We were commenting in the press box about how it felt like Cincinnati players were getting like an extra 3, 4 yards after contact, even on the tackles that they technically completed. They were just getting pushed around a little bit in that game.
What's your number 3?
Biggest concern with the team, I'm trying to think when they get well, in this matchup, it's that until I see it, um, I do not like the idea that they're about to face another mobile quarterback because that's been a disaster even when this defense was thriving the last 2 years against Philadelphia Eagles. They came into week 1, they didn't have a better approach for it against Atlanta, and they got to prove they can do it against Arizona. But guess what? They also have Lamar Jackson and the Ravens coming in a couple weeks. They get Atlanta again a couple weeks after that. They get Philadelphia again later this season. Cleveland with Deshaun Watson, maybe, even though he's not going to run quite as much, but they gave up a lot of rushing yards to him the last time they faced him. So, this, like, even if things were going well for the Saints in the other areas, I would be concerned that they have shown us no indication that they have a good plan for mobile quarterbacks, and the schedule's about to be loaded with them.
Yeah, that's fair. My other concern just overall is just accountability, coaching, all that stuff. I mean, I just think until everything is fixed, that's on the table, and it's something that they gotta figure out. And again, things we're saying at this point in the season doesn't mean they're etched in stone. They can't change. They can't fix these things, but it has been underwhelming, and I think a little bit situationally. I do see, as crazy as it sounds, because I feel like there were some coaching issues in this last game. They could have done a couple things a little bit differently. Not playing Taysom Hill really was kind of a crazy thing to me.
Yeah,
15
I agree.
snaps is
I
way too
agree,
low for a guy like
especially
him.
when you're protecting a double-digit lead in the final 20 minutes. Isn't that take some time?
It's like the play in the red zone got stopped, and like then we just didn't see him again. It was, where is he? What's going on? And that was later in the game. He should have been playing a lot more even before that. And then Shaheed, like, run that deep pattern again. Try to take that shot again. See what's up there. I mean, I understand maybe if you don't have a full package of plays for him, he didn't do a lot in the preseason. He was hurt. He just came in first game. You kind of have a couple wrinkles, but I would have tried it again. It was just a couple things that I felt like they
Or
could have
hand
went
it hand
to.
it off to him one more time.
Yeah, run the play the
Let
other
them stuff it
direction.
once. Just nobody touched him the first time. At least let them stuff it once and then say we
Yeah.
tried it twice. But Yeah, I mean, you're kinda damned if you do, damned if you don't when it comes to aggressive play calling. Because I
Right.
remember one of my biggest Twitter battles I ever had, like, I go in about once a year, maybe twice a year when I was just like, "I can't let this go," and then I go down the spiral, and it was, like, when they lost to Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers, like, 48-45, and
Mm.
everybody was like, "Sean got too cute. He shoulda just run the ball. He should have been, you're supposed to run the ball in the NFL, not pass, pass, pass on every play." And it's like, I could see this being the debate if Andy Dalton had thrown 3 straight incompletions and they gave Cincinnati the ball back with 2 minutes to go. Like, sometimes you're supposed to be able to run out the clock and to the Taysom point, that was Taysom time. Maybe we should have seen Taysom running out the clock because we saw it exactly 1 week before. That's what they did against Seattle. Run, run, pass, run, run, and they ran out the clock. So, um,
They lost
uh,
to the
uh,
Giants doing that though last year.
yeah, no, I mean, but that's what I'm saying is when it doesn't work, it's open to criticism. So, when you have Andy Dalton throwing to your fourth, fifth, and sixth receivers, and you've run for over 200 yards 2 weeks in a row, I can't kill him for that. I did love their game plan on both sides of the ball coming in the game, and Dennis Allen wasn't necessarily throwing anyone under the bus, but he said multiple times in the post game press conference, "I liked our game plan against the Bengals." And he said, first touchdown came on 3rd and 9. Second touchdown came on 3rd and 8. And he kept pointing to the red zone as being the biggest problem. So if if the Saints had executed on plays like 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, run out the clock, then we'd be talking about how they came back from this long trip to Minnesota when we were ready to bury them, and they beat Seattle and they beat Cincinnati, and we might be like, well, they survived the test.
Oh, no
So
question.
they're a couple plays away from us saying they held it together, but they didn't.
My issue with the play calling though is I think situationally, every single time that they kinda got into a spot, they got scared. Like the red zone, it was run, run, pass, run, run,
Yeah.
pass, run, run,
Yep.
pass, and it was like they were afraid to lose the opportunity to score points, so they sacrificed points by being cautious, and I felt like just maybe in one of those 5 trips, they should have just put their foot on the gas a little bit, and it
Yep.
was just like, "Well, we got so close, we can get points, we aren't gonna mess it up, and we're gonna rely on our defense." Didn't work. And that I just felt like through the whole game, it got tight in those
It
in
got
those in
tighter. Yeah,
those
the
in those
second half.
moments. Yeah.
The difference between the offense we saw in the first half, the creativity with Shaheed, the creativity with Taysom Hill, who threw 4 passes. The first time he lined up in the read option, he hands it to Kamara for a double-digit gain. Like, it was like, "Oh, wow, they're like their chess game with the you saw everything we did with Taysom this week. Now look what we do with Taysom." And he was wide open for a potential touchdown catch in the red zone, and Dalton opted to go for Kamara instead. I was like, "Oh, they," and then the stuff they did with Shaheed, I was like, "Wow, this is awesome." And that creativity all went away once they were protecting a lead.
And the one time I felt like they got kind of creative in the red zone was the wildcat play to Alvin. But if you're gonna run a play where everybody knows you're running the ball and you're telling them, "Hey, stop it," give it to Taysom. Like that's a Taysom play right there. All right, let me flip the 3 things thing, moving it forward a little bit bigger picture. Going back to the offseason,
Yeah.
the mistakes they made or the
Yeah,
things that
this is
you
a
would do
very
differently.
hot topic
The
right
things you
now,
would do
obviously.
differently. What is number 1 for you?
Well, everything is on the table now because it's not working. But no, I thought about this and I still think Dennis Allen's the right hire. But obviously with each passing loss, and if this team doesn't work out, that gets questioned. I still think Pete Carmichael Jr. is probably the right hire. But those two are going to be open to major speculation if it doesn't succeed. I talked about the secondary already. I mean, the CJ Gardner Johnson trade in hindsight looks like maybe the thing that has hurt the team the most because they've been getting destroyed in the nickel package, but they basically cut him. That wasn't like this is a shrewd trade value. I mean, they got nothing for him. So they cut him and they decided it was untenable. So that's the one that I think needs to be really put under the microscope the most because could they have made that work? Is that a failing that Dennis Allen should have just held him accountable and punished him and made an example out of him and then brought him back into line? I don't know, but that was not the solution what they did because getting rid of him has really hurt this team. And then same thing with letting Marcus Williams go and spending a little less money on Tyrann Mathieu. I think that's really hurt this team too. So those are the decisions that I think have cost the team the most. I mean, the other one you look at is did they pay too much to Jameis Winston? Should they have just gone really cheap with Andy Dalton and spent that money elsewhere? Um, but outside of those decisions, I don't really know what you could do. I mean, the biggest problem is that they've missed on their first round draft picks in recent years, I think. That would have helped a lot. But if you're just saying what could they have done differently this offseason, I mean, those are the ones you have to second guess the most.
I struggle internally with the CJ one because there's part of me that thinks like there had to be a way to manage this. Like where could they? And I'm sure when they sit down and they're honest with their thoughts, that there are a couple key moments in that where they probably think, man, if I had done this differently, that didn't have to go there. And that's just with any relationship that ends. I think there's always an autopsy, and there's probably a couple key moments where they could have probably salvaged that without paying him somehow, or did something to satiate him temporarily without committing beyond. There had to be something. But where I struggle with that is I have spent 6 or 7 weeks complaining about no accountability in trying to put more pressure and sending
Yeah, and that
messages.
was
Yeah,
accountability.
and this the one time where they kinda really went with it and they said, "You know what? You're not gonna undermine what we got going on here. We don't like how you're conducting yourself. You gotta get out of here." You're gone. And that is a message to everybody else to be on point and all that stuff. I don't know if it resonated well enough, or at least in all areas where everybody's policing themselves because of this one thing. But I think it was a moment where the coach, the GM, they showed strength, and maybe it was the wrong moment to do it. But I still do think, based on how things played out without changing stuff, it got to a point where that was it just felt inevitable if you were watching from the sidelines, and we don't even see what's going on behind the scenes, just what we saw on the field, it just felt like that's where it was headed. But yeah, I think everything though at this point is fair for analysis, dissection, and there's fault in logic probably behind a lot of this stuff. I think my one issue with their whole offseason, and it's just I think it's a blanketed thing that just kinda sits over everything. They thought they were a Super Bowl contender. Like, we had heard basically the whole offseason that they were gonna be conservative with their cap, that they were gonna kind of reset a little bit, and then the Deshaun Watson situation opened up.
Well, that's the worst thing they
They
did this
went
offseason.
Ye
They just got bailed out.
they went they kinda went all toward that to the point where they cleared the cap room to get him, and then they didn't get him, and they still continued to conduct themselves as if after that, where it was like, "Well, you know what? I guess we are going for it." And they went kinda all in on it a little bit. I mean, I don't know if signing Tyron and Jarvis is really going all in, but the draft, they definitely acted like they were a couple missing pieces away, and it just kinda felt like they really believe this, and now they aren't there. And I mean, that it's okay to fall short, to have missed expectations and all that, but they really believe that everything was all good, and it isn't. Like, it's
Well,
just so far away from what they thought they were gonna
I
be.
I thought they were in a real interesting crossroads this offseason where I didn't think it was time to think just for the future, and we've said this, and this is why the future looks so bleak, because you have Cam Jordan, who's still at the
Yeah.
tail end of his prime, you have Demario Davis, who's still at the tail end of his prime. Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara only have so many miles on their prime years that I think to rebuild now or to just reset the cap now would have been a little bit of a waste of one more year to maybe go for it with those guys because we all thought they had the nucleus of a playoff team. So I didn't, for that reason, I didn't mind the Tyrann Matthew signing. I didn't
I
mind the
don't
Jarvis Landry signing. And the one that we're going to second guess the most is that they didn't keep next year's first round pick in their back pocket in case things went wrong. But technically, they did get 2 first rounders. It's Olave and Penning. So let's just pretend it's going to look bad if they end up with a top 10 pick, but let's just pretend Penning is next year's first round pick. Um, but so, they did go for it and think they could be a playoff team. I don't know about a Super Bowl contender this year, but all those things that we just laid out are the reason why they're gonna have to decide by the end of this season if it's rip the Band-Aid off time, and I guess there's nothing preventing you from doing it. Next year will just be a rebuilding year because there's no blueprint for this to be a sustainable team. This has to be a playoff team this year. It's not getting better next year with this current roster.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say that, like, everything they did was wrong, but yeah, the draft approach, I think, is something that's open for interpretation. Maybe if you don't have that quarterback on your roster, you keep the picks in the future. Now, it is the thing where, okay, they got the Sean Payton ticket, and they just felt like, "We're gonna move the assets up, make the playoffs, and then we get our quarterback next year," but that's a huge if. You don't know that that's gonna play out how you want to. Sean might not get an opportunity that there's just so much there that you can't control. That was the one thing you could control, and there's a lot of future assets there. And then, just restructuring some of these contracts. They talked about cleaning up the cap and kind of trying to be in a situation where you could get out of some of this stuff sooner if you have to, and then they didn't. And it's just and then they spent all the money too. Like, you
Yeah.
can do the Deshaun thing and not spend the money and then pay off those debts because the money carries over. But they just had to restructure Deontay Hardy because they were down to like their
Yeah.
last $1,000,000. So,
Well, look, here's the one thing I will
and he's not going to be on the
I
team.
will agree with. It would have done them no good to be in between. Like they either needed to fire up the restart this year or do what they did. But the restart's coming.
They
I
could be
mean,
where they're at right now though without doing.
right.
They could have made the Olave trade by using the Penning pick, not pick Penning, and been in this exact situation without sacrificing as many future
No,
assets.
I agree with that. But what I'm saying is, um, saving the cap space or whatever, not signing, just having this exact same roster, but not signing Tyron and Landry and saying, "Well, we have 10 more million to spend
Yep.
next year." Like next year, next next year's bleak. But once they decided that's the lane they were going down, at the time I liked that they added the complementary pieces. I mean, if they missed the playoffs this year, everybody's gonna be like, "I wish they had just rebooted last year." But I understood why they thought they were a playoff team this year, and they added those complementary pieces. But let's look. There's this trade chart going around on Twitter that puts everything together in one chart, and it looks really bad. But it really boils down to one thing: they traded 5 picks for Chris Olave. It was if you did, I mean, I'm taking Trevor Penning out of the equation because they had the 19th pick and they drafted him at 18. So let's just pretend like they don't get this. They don't decide to go for Chris Olave and they just drafted Trevor Penning this year. If we're talking about the long-term health of this team, do you like Olave or do you wish you had those 5 picks? That's actually a fair debate.
Yeah, it is, and where they were at receiver, the one thing I just wish they would have got Olave and not given up next year's first round pick. Like, and there was probably a way to get that done somehow. Maybe
Yeah.
not. Maybe the Eagles didn't want that pick and they wanted the one in the future and they don't want the pick now. Maybe, um, it wasn't possible.
Well,
But
you probably could have just traded this year's first rounder and done the 5 picks. This year's first rounder, second rounder, third, 2/3, a fourth. That probably would have got you from your original 18 to 11.
based on how teams
Yeah.
value picks, you might have been able to give up this year's first rounder in less in the package because usually when you're trading a future pick, if you trade in the one, that's kind of viewed as a two this year, and maybe there was a way to get out of that a little bit cheaper, but they wanted both picks, and now they don't have a first rounder next year. That's the one thing I hate the most about the offseason because that puts you in a situation where either you get the Gruden deal for Sean, and that has to be relatively high if you're like, oh, we're going to draft our quarterback, or one of these two guys on your team have to hit. With respect to both of them, we haven't seen anything that says they're long-term answers at this point. Or C, you have to be the team that gets the Russell Wilson, and maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know. The other thing I hated though is just let Marcus Williams go. Like, it just felt like they thought they were going to be a different type of team at safety, and he was clearly one of the best players in the league at his position. That was the talking
They
point here
really barely made
forever.
a run at him. I mean, you were hearing whispers way before free agency started that they had
Yep.
basically decided to move on. So that was an evaluation of him. And unfortunately, with the injury he's got right now, he's not necessarily gonna be able to prove him wrong on the field. But yeah, they had a harder time replacing him than I think they thought they were gonna have.
All right, we're back to the Thursday night game. How, like, if they lose this game, what do you think happens the rest of the year? Like, are they
I'm not calling
does this
this
could this be a
right.
spiraling moment, I guess is the question.
This itself won't be the spiraling moment because this is another game where I think they're the underdog for a reason. I mean, a long trip to Arizona on a Thursday night. I don't want to be the road team in this situation, and probably still without Marshawn Lattimore, Mike Thomas, and Jarvis Landry. But all of a sudden, if they come out of this game 2-4, then they come home with back-to-back home games against the is it the Raiders and the Ravens? That those become must wins. Otherwise, it's pretty much then it's spiraled out of control. So this could buy you more time. Um, I could forgive them for losing. It's the same thing we said about the Cincinnati. I guess it depends on how they lose the game, especially since Arizona's playing so poorly. But they're going to be favored in a bunch of games this year, and this isn't one of them. But at some point, they need to steal when they don't deserve to win.
Yeah, I mean, look, if they lose this one, if they lose this one and then they lose the next, like there aren't going to be any
Yeah,
more must ones. They're just going to be don't
yeah,
matters. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's getting dangerously close to that. I don't know, man. Like I feel like the Cincinnati game was a tough loss. I don't think it
Right.
buries them, but I think it was a tough loss. I think they have to win this one. I think it's something where players just start feeling like they're snake bitten and they can't find their way back. And if we're going back, let's go back to the last topic real quick. The other massive mistake here, and it's a hindsight thing, not taking a bye. Like just thinking you're gonna be all good again. Like, oh, we're gonna cruise early season. We aren't going to need to regroup with our new coach and new players and all this stuff. And it was just kind of that assumption again of everything's going to be all good and we're going to figure it out. That bye would be so crucial right now. Just being able to press pause and stopping this so that you do get Marshawn back and Mike back and Jarvis back for any one of these games would have been a massive difference for a team that's really in a dire situation. And they would have been in a much better situation not playing football one of these weeks just to have those guys back.
They did win the game after the bye,
They
and
did.
then they should have won the Cincinnati game, so they almost survived that miscue.
But if you press pause, like,
Yeah, I agree.
you just aren't
Well,
in the
that's
same
another reason
situation.
why it would be so huge to win this game. If there's gonna be 11 days after this game, um, you'd rather be, you know, getting guys healthy and actually, like, convincing yourself that there's some hope and momentum for the rest of the season instead of stewing over, "We're at 2 and 5, and we can't lose another game."
Last question. They fixed the fumbles. They fixed the offensive penalties, assuming those stay away.
Fixed.
It's a credit, credit to DA. He did somehow stop the bleeding, got his staff to stop the bleeding on two of the big issues. Do you believe the tackling is a curable issue?
Yeah. This was the first game where I thought it was an epidemic.
They missed 12 against Carolina.
Well, I was gonna say earlier in the season when we were talking about how they just looked like they should have done more in the preseason, but,
7.5 a game they're missing right now.
God, it feels like the whole NFL sucks though. Like feels like the whole NFL needs to rethink using the preseason. I don't I have a hard time believing fumbling or missed tackles are an area where this team is just demonstrably worse than other teams in the NFL. So I don't think that'll be their undoing necessarily, except for maybe the safeties. I don't trust. I don't trust the not that that was Marcus Williams' strength, but that's the one area of the team. I mean, I believe in their front seven. I believe in them being able to finish sacks. I believe in their linebackers in general. So that's not the same way. I just didn't think fumbling was a predictive problem earlier in the season. I don't necessarily think missed tackles outside of the secondary is a predictive problem, but I don't know. That's a tough one. It's hard to give them the benefit of the doubt in any area, but um, it would sure be nice for them not to be 32nd in the NFL in the turnover ratio. That's one area where, yeah, you say they fix their fumbling problems, but overall, they're the worst in the league at giving it up versus taking it away, and that's an area where does that balance out? If it balances out, it sure would help. But is that just something they're not good at anymore?
I think like Tyron, Roby, and Adebo all have like 6 missed tackles right now.
Yeah,
So their
I'm
secondary
concerned about it there. That's fair.
their
Yeah,
secondary definitely tackles worse than probably a lot of people's secondaries. In in defense of Marcus Williams, he used to miss like 9 a year. In week 6, you got people coming up on that number. And there's a handful of tackles that don't go down as missed, but
yeah.
they go down as non-attempts too. So there's a handful of plays in that
Did Tyron
secondary.
get official missed tackle against Jamar Chase?
This week
Yeah.
for our scoring, yeah,
Yes.
I don't know how other people do it, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, definitely.
Yeah. Exactly. Because
And
he
I
should. He should.
Yeah, and I gave him, like, the benefit of doubt on the one against the Vikings where, yeah, it was a tough block, it would've been a tough play to make, but, I mean, there's been a few, and it's secondary wide. Marcus May tackles well, though. I like the way Marcus May plays. I think that he's an asset to this team. Having him with Marcus Williams would be an amazing duo. I think Tyron can,
Yeah.
get on path though. Like I think there's still something, that it just kinda has to click for the whole secondary. I
I
think they
mean, if
still
you
got
get
pieces.
back to actually seeing what this secondary looks like with Lattimore and Adebo starting, Roby back in the slot, and Matthew and May both at safety. I mean, yeah, it would be nice if there were no injuries anywhere in the NFL, but I do wonder if there's some hope for the secondary if you get those starting five. And then PJ Williams should have been the guy who cleaned up this mess in the slot in recent weeks, and then he goes on IR at the wrong time too, because they shouldn't have had to when Justin Evans wasn't the answer, they should have been able to turn right back to PJ Williams instead of having to, bring in Chris Harris off the street. And
9 for
um,
10 target in the slot.
so a healthy secondary might clean some of that up. But no, when you say missed tackles, my brain immediately went to the linebackers, and I trust the linebackers. But yeah, in the missed tackles in the secondary, again, I led this podcast off by saying the secondary is my biggest concern on the team going forward, and so missed tackles is a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, the linebackers have both missed 5 or 6. Werner should have had a sack last week, didn't have it. Those guys, though, I mean, that kinda comes with the territory. It's like a rangy shortstop that gets a couple more errors than somebody else. Like, they're getting the places that they shouldn't get. I don't blame they're the guys that are kinda holding the defense down right now. I lied. Last one. Do you find snaps for Alontae Taylor if he's healthy?
Sure, sure. I mean,
I think he needs
yeah,
to. I think you gotta find out.
they don't wanna move him into the slot, but maybe you can move Roby into the slot if you put Taylor inside. They need a new answer in the slot, so that's a pretty simple answer right there. Taylor outside, Roby in the slot. I
The
would do
play on
that
the
for
outside
sure,
could
yeah.
also get a little bit better too. I
Yeah,
mean, if
yeah.
someone can I think you have to find out. I think you gotta get 'em in there somehow to find out. That's where the season's at. They gotta find things out in this area that should have been the biggest strength of this team. If you like the podcast, you like the coverage, check us out, NewOrleans.Football/subscribe. Extra podcasts on there every week, all of our analysis columns, commentary, news, all that. We got it for you. And we'll have your coverage on this game all throughout the week on the website. And we'll have another podcast on YouTube and your podcast streaming apps Friday morning breaking down the game at Arizona. So thanks for listening and
Hey, 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 hey. Nick, Trip, Kev, I got you. What up, DJ? We in the dome right now. We in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
We in the dome right now. We in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
As you can tell, last year it was an off year. But we reloaded and now it is our boss year. Adebo back there and yeah, we got the badge. Don't forget my son and don't forget the pass rush. James QB1 dropping down to MT. Handed